Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar where we would like to talk with you about how to tackle food fraud and have some conversation with our great guests, Silverani and Ricardo. Thank you for being there. Hello, both of you.
Hello, good morning. Good afternoon, actually.
Good afternoon, everyone.
So we have, I think it's an important topic because we have more than 500 participants subscribed to this webinar, and from more than 50 countries. So it is an important issue, and it is definitely something that interests, I would say, all the world. Our guests. So Silverani is the UK Deputy Government Chemist and Executive Director of the Food Authenticity Network at LGC, and we will present later the important work that is done by the Food Authenticity Network. She has over 25 years experience in the analysis of food and agricultural samples, working across a variety of policy areas with different stakeholder groups to improve standards in measurement science. She has been the chair of the UK Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, or DEFRA, Authenticity Methods Working Group since 2013. She's part of the UK delegation for the Codex Committee on Methods of Analysis and Sampling, and is part of the UK delegation that serves on the CEN Committee for Standardization of Methods for Food Authenticity. She's also a member of different committees and boards in relation to food authenticity, research, nutrition, and in the Safe to Trade scheme, which was launched in response to COVID-19 pandemic. And in October 2020, she was awarded an MBE. So I looked after what it meant. It's the most excellent order of the British Empire in the Queen's Birthday Honours List 2020 for services to food measurement services. What a resume. Thank you very much, Silverani, for being here with us.
Thank you, Bruno.
And then also welcome Ricardo. Ricardo Siligato is a project officer at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. And within the GRC unit F4, very precise, he focuses on food fraud and is in charge, in particular, of the Food Fraud Monthly Report that I invite all of you to consult if you are not doing it, because I'm waiting for it every month. And we will also mention it, of course, later and the access. And well, Ricardo, after studying biotechnology and biology in Rome, he has completed a PhD in plant genetics at the University of Helsinki and a Master of Laws in Food Law. And Ricardo might have less years of experience, but he has been very, very busy since then, because he has been working in a private law firm in the European Food Safety Authority, or EFSA, as policy advisor for COPA-COGECA, which is European Farmers and Agri Cooperatives, before joining the European Commission and GRC last year. So again, both of you, it's really a pleasure to have you with us and to share about what we can do to improve food fraud prevention together.
Thank you.
So what I propose you is that we will give some context about food fraud. Of course, the objective of this webinar is not to have a lecture about how to do vulnerability assessment, but some sharing about some knowledge about food fraud. And why are we talking about food fraud? Obviously, it is as old as, depending on the presentation of the Hammurabi Code or of the Roman Empire, and there are also the treatise on adulteration of food and culinary poisons, which was written by Frederick Ackham in 1820. Actually, we can think that food fraud is as old as the moment when the human beings started to trade food for something else, and it's a way, of course, for those who are a bit less honest than the others to take advantage. But it's also something which is old, but is really currently happening, and we see it through the monthly reports that Ricardo is preparing for us. And in the past, there are some highlights, if we can say so, in terms of food fraud. In particular, I would highlight the melamine food fraud issue in 2008, where we had there were 300,000 babies that were intoxicated. There is also in 2009 the Peanut Corporation of America food fraud issue that really reshaped the way America thought about all the food safety system. It was the beginning of the Food Safety Modernization Act. And not last and not least, is of course the food safety scandal or Horsegate, that somehow, in my opinion, a bit strangely, was one thing that really made more people be concerned about food safety, at least in the standard from the standard side. But every year, every month, every week, there are some food fraud issues, and one of the things that, of course, we don't know how they will affect the safety of the consumers. And in many reports, we have also deaths happening because of adulterated food. If we look for explanations about why it's becoming so complex and why it's becoming so important, is that indeed we have a very, very complex supply chain, and this is something that you can look live on your computer, which is the maritime traffic of the goods in the world. And of course, there are a lot of actors in this food supply chain. And one of the topics is really, do we know where the ingredients that we use come from? Thanks to IFS, in their food fraud guidance, there was a study done on a deep frozen pizza. And they analyzed that actually there were more than 30 ingredients in this pizza, but also coming from more than 30 potential origins. And this is also something that companies have sometimes difficulty to deal with. I have this number in my mind when I think about food fraud is 30. Why? Because one of the estimates that was done, I think, by the European Union was that it was at least 30 billion of euros of damage what food fraud represented, but there are also some other figures around, is it 40, 50, whatever it is, actually it's most probably underestimated. And also 30 because in the different reports that we can see around fish, about spices, about tea, we very often see that it's at least 30% of the products that are analyzed that are adulterated in some way. So it has really a very big impact on the goods we eat. We know about the most frauded food products. This is something that is regularly mentioned. And if we look again at the reports that Ricardo is preparing, we usually see them coming again. Sometimes there are new ones, but there are always olive oil, fish, organic products, milk, cereals, honey, tea, coffee, spices, wine, and juices. And of course, we can ask ourselves, so what is food fraud? exactly in order to apprehend what we can do to prevent it. And there are in these definitions of food fraud one aspect which is, when I said definition or trying to understand what food fraud is, there's one aspect which is very important, is the intentional aspect of fraud, and that makes it completely different to the unintentional or accidental adulteration that can be a cause of food safety issues or food quality issues in a company. In the intentional adulteration world, I would say, there is the food fraud, and it is principally driven by the gain. The motivation is gain, whereas food defense, the principal motivation is really to harm people or companies with it. And what's very interesting when you study about food fraud is that you see that there are a lot of publication gathering collections of food fraud definitions, as if we were not able together to come with one simple definition, which is the intentional adulteration for where the motivation is financial gain. In Europe, there are interesting criteria which have been defined. So in Europe, and Ricardo, please correct me if I'm wrong, but an issue to be considered a fraud, there must be four criteria happening. It must be a violation of regulations, EU regulations. There must be a deception of consumer. It must be with economical gain, and the intention must be proven, which in some cases may be an issue to prove that it is intentional. And one topic that I wanted to discuss also with Ricardo and Serrani is the ethylene oxide or ETO food issue that we are experiencing, and that a lot of companies are experiencing for months now, so since end of September 2020. So it's more than 6 months now, and there are thousands and thousands of recalls in some countries, withdrawals in some others in Europe. And it's affecting not only sesame, but ginger, rice, pepper, a lot of spices. And when we had the preparation and the discussion with Ricardo about this webinar, I discussed that why is this not considered as a food fraud? Because some of the criteria seem to be there, but it's something that Ricardo can tell us very rapidly. So I will open now to our first panel discussion. Right. So maybe to Severani, you have seen a bit this picture about food fraud and how important it is. As executive director of this Food Authenticity Network, now for some years, do you think that we are taking collectively the good measures to prevent food fraud? We cannot hear you.
Yeah, I'm on mute.
Yes.
Good practice. Thank you very much, Bruno, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. It was a really nice introduction to this issue, and you very nicely highlighted just how much of a global issue this is. So I think it's not only important that we work together, but it's imperative that we work together. Otherwise, we can't effectively tackle food fraud and try and stay at least in line with the fraudsters who are getting more and more technologically savvy every day. So in terms of, I think personally that a lot's been done globally since the 2013 horse meat issue. And as you said, it's quite ironic in a way that it wasn't a food safety issue, whereas some of the other incidents have been food safety issues. But it, I think, very nicely highlighted what's important to consumers, because it sort of raised the issue that it's not a food safety concern, but actually if I can't trust the label on my food, well, what else, can I trust about my food? And it really, in the UK and across the EU and the world, it's really rocked consumers' confidence in our food supply chain, which obviously is very damaging. So in the UK, I think we had some very, very good initiatives that have been kicked off since the 2013 horse meat incident. And firstly, we've got now 2 crime units in the UK, one the National Food Crime Unit, and the second is the Scottish Food Crime and Incidents Unit, who are now both looking at serious food fraud in the food supply chain, and they weren't in existence before the horse meat incident. We also have the Food Intelligence Industry Intelligence Network, and that's a really unique collaboration in the world where the food industry have come together. So some of these people are competitors, they're manufacturers and retailers, but actually for the greater good, they've come together and anonymously they're sharing their analytical test results. So, if it's just one person doing 500 tests, obviously you can have some trend analysis in that. But now I think they've got over 45 members. And if you look at all of the analytical data, they pull all of that data anonymously and they do trend analysis. So that's a lot more informative. And then it enables them to then look at their testing for the future year, and then they can adapt that. So that's a big step forward. And last but not least, the Food Authenticity Network, which is also unique in the world. And it was set up really as a response to the 2013 Elliott Review, which made very strong recommendations saying that those working in this area needed access to reliable laboratories doing fit-for-purpose testing. There's a lot of laboratories doing testing, but you need to be able to trust the results and work in partnership with your laboratory partners to be able to do this. And so that's what we're about, making sure that best practice information on both food authenticity testing and food fraud prevention, because actually it's not only testing is only part of the solution. It has to be the whole supply chain we need to get better at sort of protecting. And that's all available in one convenient location, which we will see later. I think I'll stop talking and I'll allow Ricardo to come in.
Thank you. Ricardo, about this this definition or this lack of definition. I remember that in one of the food integrity, one of the last, let's say, official European food integrity conference a couple of years ago, it was mentioned that the EU was working on the definition, and is it happening? So is there an issue in consensus about what is food fraud?
Well, first of all, thank you, Bruno, for the invitation and the opportunity to be here with Sambarani. It's a pleasure to be here with her. And we are aware that there is not a clear legal definition of food fraud in Europe. I do agree that the horse meat scandal somehow triggered an internal process in the European Union to boost a bit more the fight against food fraud. So, for example, since 2013, the European Union has established the EU Food Fraud Network. And since 2018, the Knowledge Center on Food Fraud and Quality, which is managed by the GRC, and it's the knowledge center where I'm working. And at the international level, our colleagues in the G Center are also members of a Codex Committee, and I can tell you precisely which one it is. It is the Codex Committee, yes, here it is, on food import and export inspection and certification systems, and they're working there together with under the presidency of the United States to harmonize the definition of food fraud internationally speaking. But what I want to stress is that it is true that we haven't a legal definition of food frauds, but we have a legal definition of food frauds notifications. Mm-hmm. And I will read, if you allow me, what is the definition of food fraud notification in our EU legislative framework, which is paragraph 21 of Article 2 of the IMSOC regulation. So it's the regulation 2019-1715, which states, any suspected intentional action by businesses or individuals for the purpose of deceiving purchasers and gaining undue advantage therefrom in violation of the rules referred to. And then there is a reference to another legislation with a list of all the European legislative framework that is somehow considered related to food fraud. And this is enough to fight food frauds in Europe for now, especially through the EU food fraud network. We are aware that it would be better to have, of course, a legal definition. It is not expected or foreseen in the near future, but we do not even somehow eliminate the possibility to develop it. But we are working on it. So.
Okay, great. And now, I don't know if it's related with the definition or the criteria, but this ETO or ethylene oxide crisis, why isn't it considered, as I understood, as a food fraud? Are not the 4 criteria gathered?
Well, first of all, this is considered mostly a food safety issue. So what we see is that some exporters, in order to comply with the subset of the EU food safety legislation, they violated another subset of the EU food safety legislation. Okay,
so you have the violation of the EU rule.
Indeed, but it is not so easy to demonstrate that it was for economic gain or it was really, intentional to not comply with the legislation. So mostly it is safety. But what I want to stress, and I was also discussing with other colleagues in Jersey, in Sante, was that regardless of the classification of the ethylene oxide case, the response, the quality of the response, meaning the impact and the also the typology of response, is actually not dependent on the classification itself. So regardless of the classification of the ethylene oxide case as a food fraud or a food safety, food quality, even food defense, the Commission is always replying in the same manner. So the lack of a classification is not really impacting on
the way to react
actions. Exactly.
I
hope I replied to your question.
Very well. Okay, all right. Then I propose you to move forward.
Bruno, can I just add, just in terms of definitions, I just wanted to highlight that you mentioned the European Standardization Group, CEN, and I just wanted to highlight that there is a committee called Technical Committee 460, and there is a working group 1 that's in session at the moment, trying to develop definitions for food fraud and related terms. And we had a meeting 3 this morning, and we're going through a working draft. So over the next course of hopefully the next 12 months, there will be a document that people will be able to comment on before it's finalized. But at least it is not a legal definition, but it will be a big step forward in there's a standardized set of definitions that will be very useful for everyone working in the world in this field.
Yeah, setting the standards, international recognized. Great news. Thank you very much. So the next part of this presentation is about what can food operators do, and especially which tools can they use today. As I say, it's not about vulnerability assessment. We know that in order to do a vulnerability assessment, of course, you need to have a product fraud assessment team, but it's always start by the risk assessment. And to do a proper risk assessment, you need to have access to information that allow you to evaluate this risk. And after, you can look at your products, at the suppliers, and knowing your suppliers is very, very important, as we saw about the supply chain and knowing where the products are coming from and what are the risks related to those countries. And then in the, let's say, food fraud management system aspect of it, so that you have to implement, based on this vulnerability assessment, a food fraud mitigation plan. You implement control measures, and Silverani is well aware of all the analytical aspect of it, but it's not only analytical response, because indeed getting rid of bad suppliers can also be a very effective response, or more risky suppliers. And then you need to have in place a review of the risk assessment at the end, or your mitigation plan, which also implies that you have access to relevant information. And this information today, if we look at food fraud databases, you have like two worlds. The world of the private sector, and here I present two of the most known databases, one being Discernis, which was from the United States Pharmacopoeia, which was a free database some years ago and became private. And you have also Horizon Scan from FERA, which helps evaluate the risk, because both of them have different capabilities, or different ways to show. One is maybe more visual than the other. Another one allows to have more specific research. But I would say they are private, so they cost some money. On the other hand, you have initiatives like the IFS that is publicly offering some information about food fraud, but only to the companies that are free, but only to the companies that are IFS certified. You have the RAFS portal, which is interesting, and where you can also do a lot of queries and exportation. But if we compare, for instance, with the private ones, actually the food fraud alerts are much less represented than in the other databases, probably because of the criteria, and if they are not alerts, there can be information that are of public knowledge, but that are not considered food fraud or are not within the RAFS system. We have, luckily, I would say, the monthly food fraud summary reports, which are now done since 2016, with this summary of, and Ricardo, of course, you will be able to tell much more about it, but which are linked with the public media coverage of food fraud incidents around the world. And very interesting is that it is based on a database which is open to everyone, which is called Medicis. And Ricardo, and through the GRC, was kind enough to share with us the link of this database, where you can see what are the information that are used about to cover and to extract this report. So I will just show. This is here showing this food adulteration report. It's really about all what happens around the world, and it's possible to define which language should be analyzed, and there are possibilities of queries. I believe. I am not sure though that we can have the query that Ricardo is using. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about it. And there was this initiative, which was a European initiative, and there is still a website of it from the FERA, the Food Integrity Program, and there are very interesting information. In particular, a book that really every food fraud risk analyst should have, because it's really a very comprehensive book, and really it's a great work detailing for each category of food what are the risks, what are the analysis. It's really something that I really recommend. So this is something that you can find also on the network. And there is also, of course, the food authenticity network website that Selvarani will also discuss from the project or will present to us. You have also a lot of information about events, food fraud mitigation, guidance, tools, reports. So it's really also a place to go if you are looking for information. And this is here just a picture of some of the guidance documents, and the book, the Food Integrity Handbook, is really a must-have. Also, the food fraud mitigation guidance from the United States Pharmacopoeia or the IFS standard. There is also the SSAFE initiative, which is also, they have published tools to do the food fraud vulnerability assessments, and some private companies such as Nestle have also a food fraud prevention guide. So there are a lot of information available. Thanks to initiatives like the Food Authenticity Network, it's possible to gather all this information, and also what the GRC is doing, because at least when you go there, you have information about food fraud, and it helps. I'm not sure that everyone knows about it. And so that would be then my second, our second round of discussions about these databases, and maybe to Ricardo. We have seen that there are private, public, some public information, but not all that comprehensive. So are there some projects to make data more widely available, like the RAFs, but also including food fraud?
Well, first of all, within the RASP, we have the AAC subsection, which is dedicated to the food frauds. But this section is only listing, including the cross-country cases, meaning food fraud cases that are targeting more than one member state. Mm-hmm. And this is why in 2016, the JRC started to develop this food fraud report to try to catch a bit what was happening within not only our member states, but also, let's say, at the global level. We monitor in 6 languages, which is English, German, French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese. And we are, in our classification, we are pretty much aligned with the RASP. Regarding any project or any databases at the European level, but we haven't really, for now, any project for the public. And this is because those who really store the information in Europe are not the European institutions, are the member states. They perform the official controls, and some of them, they also have some public websites where they list in a collective manner, or they extract some data, or even single cases, or for example, the Opsom reports from the Europol. Mm-hmm. But we also do not have access to the data from the member states. Mm-hmm. So, of course, at the European level, for now, there isn't a project to share more widely such information. But I hope that in future there will be an opportunity to integrate a bit more of the information at European and possibly global level as well.
Yeah, and to help everyone to prevent food fraud, having the best information. But thank you for the work that you do at the GRC, because it really helps having a better picture of these cases, even if it's scary sometimes. And Selvarani, between all these food authenticity stakeholders and within your network, what could be done so that we gain access or we share more openly about the information on food fraud?
Yeah, we definitely need greater transparency in the data. And you highlighted a couple of databases, commercial databases on food fraud incidents. But also what's very important in the food authenticity area is sort of sharing information on authentic samples. Because in the area of food authenticity, we're not working with legal limits like for ethylene oxide. There are maximum residue limits for a lot of the contaminants and things that are of food safety concern. But when you come to food authenticity, the way that people determine whether something is authentic or not is by comparing it with a set of known samples that we deem to be authentic. But usually these databases cost a lot of money to set up because, for example, take honey, for example, it's a natural commodity that's produced all over the world and bees forage in all sorts of places. So in order to set up a honey database that represents different types of pollen sources, different geographical origin, different types of bees, you can see how complex it is. So usually this involves hundreds of thousands of pounds of investment from the people setting up the databases, which then understandably means that the data is closed and not openly accessible to people. So when you send samples for analysis, some results come back, and because people can't see the data with which the interpretation was made, it's somehow difficult to accept some of the results sometimes, which causes disputes and challenges. So I think the only database I know that's open to regulators is the EU wine database that Ricardo's JRC look after. But and Ricardo may be able to tell us, but it's a very expensive thing to maintain because it's all done under lock and key, and the samples are all taken by official inspectors. So definitely, I think we need to move forward. In the DNA area, there are databases called the BOLD database and the Barcode for Life database that do have a lot of sequencing data for species. And if we could come to something like that for food authenticity, where we publicly share information and people are allowed to upload data into publicly owned databases, that would be a big step forward. Lots of people are talking about it. I don't know of any public project at the moment, but in the future, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, collaboration without data transparency is something which is very complicated. Or I mean, in this, if we want really to make a big step on it, so let's hope for the best in this area. So the last round of and we have a question from the audience about reference about food packaging. Are there databases of food packaging materials? And I know that this is one of the difficulties because there are not so many food fraud cases publicly known about packaging materials, right? I don't know, Ricardo, in your experience, have you seen this?
I did not really encounter so much food fraud cases related to packaging material, probably because the media tend to focus more on the product itself, I guess.
Yeah.
I think there is a lot of packaging fraud that happens, and I certainly don't know of any databases around that. But for example, in a lot of the wines and spirits, the industry does a lot to make sure that they actually make the labels intelligent labels, so that it's very difficult to copy some of the labeling, a bit like banknotes. So they're trying to put in more safety around the label and make them more intelligent, and obviously technology plays a role in that, so you can get these digitally intelligent labels, which makes it a lot harder then for the fraudsters to copy. And I know there's this the Scottish Whisky Research Institute, which is an industry funded research institute. They do a lot on protecting their brands to make sure that they look at authenticity, but right through the supply chain, from the whiskey in the bottles all the way to the end retail product with all the packaging. But unfortunately, I don't know of any databases with this information. Because a lot of it is about commercial brand reputation. So it's usually held within the companies themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting aspect about the counterfeiting, right, of some packaging materials, and on the other hand, since packaging is a process industry with also the interest that you can have for economical gain to do some cost reduction and cheating the consumer or the customer. The analysis, I know that when the GFSI thought about food fraud requirements, they considered, and I think it's right to do so, that the packaging for food could also be frauded. But as you say, Ricardo, there are less cases reported, and probably also it's held within the company. So if there are some issues with packaging, maybe it's not that easy to identify if it's a fraud or not.
Indeed, but if we speak about violations of the intellectual property rights, then I do agree that, especially, for example, in the alcoholic beverages sector, it's quite wild. For example, we recently published, together with my head of unit, Franz Ulbert, an article on New Food Magazine, when we provided a sort of analysis of the food fraud monthly reports that were published since 2016. And alcoholic beverages were one of the top 10 for sure. And they were really heavily affected by ABR infringements, for example. Mm-hmm. So it is interesting to notice as well, what is the trend specific for each commodity or product?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that. So the last topic we wanted to discuss is about at the end one aspect, which is that we have already a bit addressed, but it's about collaboration, transparency, and somehow integration of the food fraud in the risk of the company. But we will talk about collaboration and just a bit about transparency. Collaboration, because we've said, I think it's key to collaborate between companies, between producers, suppliers, distributor, and also in the private and public sector. And I wanted to share an initiative from SSafe that already launched some years ago food fraud mitigation and risk analysis tool. And they have shared recently training modules on the different topics related to food fraud and also to integrity, with the intervention of the expert Chris Elliott in particular, but highlighting really this topic. And this is really something that I invite everyone to look at, because it's really very, very interesting material. And it's also the fruit, as safe, of the collaboration between universities, between private companies, and I think it's really this kind of initiative that help improve the situation. Oh, what is that? There's also this initiative that we can maybe we will surely discuss. Is indeed this food authenticity network that also helps in this private-public partnership to collect, to share knowledge. And you can see here the website of the Food Authenticity Network. And maybe Silverani, can you tell us a bit more about that? About your work. Sorry.
No, thank you, Bruno. No, just to show that collaboration is vital. So the Food Authenticity Network was set up, as I said, in 2015 as a direct response to the Elliott Review, and to make sure there was this coordination between all the stakeholders working in this area, and have all of the information pooled on an open access basis for all stakeholders. So we were very clear from the very beginning that we wanted this to be a free and open access website, so that everyone in the world benefits from this information, and not just those that can afford to pay for it. So it was set up by DEFRA and then supported by the Food Standards Agency and Food Standards Scotland for about 3 to 4 years. But then after that, we looked at a sustainability model and we thought, look, producing safe, nutritious and authentic food is everyone's responsibility. So we thought it has to be a public-private partnership. So we built this model where the UK government now, the business department, the BASE, they fund the running of the network so we can continue to operate it on an open access basis. But then all of the other companies that are below the line there under the past and present supporters, they're all commercial or organisations or charities and actually believe in raising standards in food integrity around the world. And they believe in the work of the network and they support the network financially to a small sum of money. And that's the model that we've really built, like a crowdfunding type model where we raise small amounts of money from lots of people that all have a very shared vision for sort of raising standards in this area. And it's been very effective. And, you know, we're talking to other companies right at the moment. We're hoping that everyone will buy into this global vision because actually we don't want all the different countries to have their own food authenticity network because that sort of defeats the object. We need one platform where we can share all the information because we're all fighting the same issues. So by working together, actually, I think we're stronger together. And we hope this network allows a platform for people to be able to do that.
And what can we do to join this network? Is it how expensive is it, and how can we do?
But to be a member, it's completely free, as I said, and I can share a link with anyone who's interested. It takes less than a minute, just 6 questions, and you get information from us, including a monthly roundup of news with links to all of the reports that we publish. To be a supporter, the minimum fee and for charities and SMEs starts at £1,000 a year, £1,000 a year, which, you know, is very cost effective. And the most it goes up to is £10,000 a year for the multinational companies that can afford to sort of pay that sum of money. So the most we'll ask for from any commercial organisation is £10,000. And for that, you get some various benefits. Half of that money goes to supporting the network, but the other half, say if it was £10,000, the other £5,000, we can work on joint projects together so that the company investing gets some benefit for their own company as well.
That's great. So we are putting the link to join the Food Authenticity network. It's right now on the screen.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Ricardo. About this private-public relation, I wanted to ask you a question, because when you come across a food fraud issue within a company, in my view, there is a bit sometimes a misconception or different approach. One saying, okay, you should investigate as much as possible to be sure that it's a food fraud. And the other one say, no, you should not investigate. That's not your role. You should be, the company has not because it's almost food criminology. No, if it's a food crime, you won't be able, and you are not qualified to investigate if really an issue is a food fraud, and you should report then to the authorities. So what's in your view possible to do to improve this transparency from the companies so that they are less reluctant to disclose information?
Well, for sure, I think a company should take care of the reputation as well. So it will be important to share information with the public authorities, which are not the institutions in this case, are of course the authorities from the member states. Mm-hmm. I do believe, and I totally agree with Salvarani, that we need to collaborate together to tackle the issue. How many times are we testing the same supplier, for example? Different companies are testing the same supplier over and over again. So a dream would be to have a safe, no-blame IT environment where the public and the private can communicate and tackle together the phenomenon of food frauds. And this is similar to what is done currently with the RASP at a certain level, But of course, as I said before, this is only for cross-country cases.
Mm-hmm.
But if we will be able to translate such mechanism also at national level, and if we would be trusting each other, meaning public and private, but also public and public and private, then we will all benefit, because we can start to test, for example, not the same supplier over again, but we can redirect resources to test multiple suppliers, and ultimately we will strengthen our European food systems, and of course global indirectly. This is what I hope one day we will be able to achieve.
Yeah. So we come again to the transparency and collaboration need to improve this. But thank you, Ricardo, for this comment. So we come now to the last, let's say, round and Q&A. So if you have questions on the different networks, you can post them, and we can try to answer them. And if not, if it's not possible, we can always answer them afterwards in the LinkedIn webinar recording. So don't hesitate to ask your questions. I will have a last question to both of you. Do you think that we have forgotten to speak about some topic? Or is there something else that you would like to share with us?
Shall I go first, Ricardo? Okay. Yeah, I suppose the elephant in the room is the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think we all agree that the disruption caused by COVID-19 all across the world has definitely increased the potential for food fraud to happen. And over the last year, I know various people have been looking to see whether food fraud incidents have been increasing, and we've seen a number of publications. And the Food Authenticity Network actually worked with a third horizon scanning database-based provider called Safety HUD, who I think have been around for 2 years, because there was a slide presented last June that said there were dramatic increases in food fraud due to the pandemic, which showed increases of maybe 800%, 500%, something really quite worrying. We weren't seeing this at the Food Authenticity Network, and other people said they weren't seeing this either. So when we went back and we data mined the data, actually the percentages were right, but when you looked at the data, the increases were maybe from 5 incidents to 8 incidents, or 5 to 10, which in a global context is not something that I didn't think we needed to panic about. However, it did show that when we looked at another 2 6-month period from 2019 to 2020, we looked at January to June, it did show that there was a small increase. And that was against a backdrop of less reporting generally, because as we all know, most of the regulators were furloughed, so they weren't able to do physical inspections or take physical samples. So I think that's quite a worrying trend, and I think we all agree that the true effect of COVID-19 on food fraud hasn't been seen yet. So the next 12 months are critical. As some countries are coming out of lockdown measures, I think we will probably see more incidents coming as more official samples are taken. We need to be very careful. So on the Food Authenticity Network, we actually created a COVID-19 resource base where we pulled all the information on the network together in one place that people can use. So I think businesses are doing a fantastic job in trying to assure the food supply chain. And really, we haven't seen anything major happen, and they've been able to meet the demand, increased demand in food because of the disruption. But the resources are there for people to use if they need it.
Okay, thank you. Ricardo, any comment?
Yeah, sure. I totally agree with Silvarani, and I want to build on her comment. I think there is a sort of momentum now for putting our European food systems under the spotlight. With the farm to fork strategy that was published by the European Commission more than 1 year ago, also there, for example, food fraud is clearly mentioned as an element that is jeopardizing the integrity of our food systems. What I think it will be very effective in the future is to safeguard the food systems, not by classifying too much or separating, for safety cases, food fraud, food quality, food defense, which is also very important. But by addressing jointly in an harmonious way the food systems through also new technological developments that we see on the market. This is, for example, something that we're already reflecting in the Commission, and I hope that we will be able to strengthen the traceability of our food systems in Europe.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. That's a lot to come for the future and to look for in the future. Okay, we don't have many times left for questions, unfortunately. I just want to thank you, the two of you, and let hear our contacts, so you can follow us through LinkedIn. You can also please ask the questions in the different, in particular in LinkedIn. I'm sure that we will look at it, Ricardo and Silverani, and to know if there are some topics where we can help you. And I want to thank everyone for having participated to this webinar, and thank you again, Silverani and Ricardo, for joining this session.
Thank you for inviting me, Bruno. It was a really good discussion. Thanks, Ricardo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.